So with me today we have brand consultant Katia Bololia. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
And I'd like to put just a few questions to you today, Katia, just to get your perspective on things from a sort of commercial point of view, as working as a professional in the industry, and also as an ex-student.
Absolutely.
To provide maybe some insight to the students I'm currently working with. So first of all, what do you consider your professional title to be, and do you think this title is reflective of what you do, you have done, and the way you think?
Well, that depends. Because I have worked in various aspects of the fashion industry, my title tends to change depending on a project, because I'm a multidisciplinary professional. So when I have been working with a fashion magazine, for example, I had been a fashion editor and a stylist, and that had to do with styling, but also journalism, fashion writing. But since I went freelance out of the magazine, I have been working mostly as a freelance stylist and a brand consultant for various fashion brands, where I look into the brand image, the marketing tools, and the way they're taking the brand out there, you know, through their digital media, through their lookbooks or their photography, anything that has to do with the creative direction and the brand image.
Right, okay. So since graduating from college, what has been the most significant area of your development, taking into consideration all of the things that you do now?
It has been quite a journey, because when I first went into college on my first year, I thought I wanted to be a fashion designer.
Right.
But giving a try to it in the first couple of months, I realized that wasn't the pathway for me. So then I changed from fashion design to fashion promotion, where I focused more on creative direction, editorial, magazines, styling, and photography. So doing that and graduating from that, I went out as a graduate trying to become a stylist. And I have been working with magazines, I have been styling fashion shoots, I have worked on the catwalk, I have worked with as a personal stylist for celebrities and artists. And that is, you know, different areas of styling. But at the same time, having worked as a stylist for a few years, I realized after that, like working in the industry, that that wasn't my sole interest, that my ideas were a little bit broader than just, you know, dressing up a model or doing a catwalk or an editorial. And I kind of wanted to work more in the creative direction side of the things. How do you work with a brand in completely 360, creating a brand universe? So after a few years being a stylist, I have kind of evolved into, let's say, an informal creative director of a brand, like the right hand of the designer, where I see everything the brand represents, who it talks to out there, who is the target customer, and how do you approach the target customer? How do you make them understand the message of the brand? Because every different label, every different brand, whether it's shoes or hats or clothes or whatever, they have a different message to convey. So how do you take that message out there? How do you make them understand that this is the philosophy of the brand, this is the ethos, this is what I'm making, this is how I'm making it, and this is what I'm selling to you, basically. So it kind of moved into a more marketing and branding area rather than strict styling.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I was going to ask you a question before, but I think you've answered it in your expansion, which was, what was it that led to you feeling that fashion, specifically fashion, wasn't right, and maybe, you know, your future lay more in the area of fashion promotion? But I think you've outlined a number of things that answer that question. But do you think that it's something to do fundamentally, it's something to do with you wanting a broader picture and wanting to work with that broader picture? I think changes in the career
come organically. You do something and you realize you're good at it. For example, when I was a fashion editor, a lot of new up-and-coming designers, they would come to me and they would ask me questions. How do I do this? How do I do that? What do you think my lookbook should look like? What do you think my website should look like? So I was an unofficial mentor in a way to up-and-coming designers. I would tell them, change that, don't do that. This is what the buyers want to see. This is what the catwalk needs to look like. And so just doing that informally, it kind of organically grew into changing a career, changing my way and thinking, you know, I like that, I'm good at that, I would like to do that more. than just, you know, doing it for my friends, if that makes sense.
That's perfect, thank you. So then, what are your current professional aspirations? And do they differ from those you had while studying? Which I guess they do.
Yes, they do. They do a lot, because it has been a pathway, as I said, you start things out and then you realize if they fit in your skills and mindset. For example, when I started in fashion design, I had the skills to do it in terms of sewing and pattern cutting, but I didn't like the creative process of it. I didn't like the fact that I had to work on a single idea for so long, for 6-7 months. And that was the part of it that it was tiring me up, having the same idea and working on it again and again and again till you exhaust it. And that's when I thought, I want my ideas to become reality fast. I didn't have the patience to have an idea for 6 months to go through a collection. And so it has to do with technical skills, either you can do it, you know, with your hands, but also it has to do how do you visualize it. And that was a turning point for me when I was in college. I wanted to do creative direction because I had an idea for a shoot and I wanted it to be done and then move to another idea. And so that's how it changed in college. And then later when I came out, as I said, it was an organic change throughout the industry. You work in the industry, you see things, and you see a job you might not know existed. And, you're saying, oh, I like that, I could do that. And also it's good to hear feedback as well. I had fantastic help from a big agency in Paris where they tapped on my strengths. And when you hear someone else saying it to you, looking at your portfolio and saying, you're more than a stylist, you do more of creative direction, you kind of realize, oh yeah, I have, you know. So it's good to hear other people's opinion, other professionals' opinion that you respect, and to see where your strengths lay and where your weaknesses lay. Wonderful.
You've been lucky to get that kind of feedback, I mean, from someone.
I think it's constructive. You have to hear. Some people don't want to hear that, you know, they're bad at something. Some people don't want to hear that, you know, you're not a good photographer, you're not a good stylist. They will shut down and say, oh, yes, I am. But you have to be open-minded and say...
responsive,
And responsive and say, maybe I'm better in something else than what I'm doing now. Maybe there is an area of my talents and my skills that I haven't tapped into yet.
Good, thank you. So, do you think it's possible to establish a personal methodology, a way of doing and thinking while being an undergraduate, or do you think that the establishment of a methodology requires more experience and knowledge than is possible to acquire on a 3 or 4 year program?
I think the basis starts in college. When you come in college and you're 18, 19 years old, you have no clue how the industry works. The basis of a methodology and an organizational skills will start here. The way you organize yourself to deliver a project in uni is the basis for how you're going to deliver a project when you're a graduate and a professional.
Of course,
So it starts with here of having to learn how to tap into your creativity, how to tap into your inspirations, how to learn how to do research correctly, because it's a very, very basic skill of the fashion industry in general. Whether you're a designer or a photographer or a stylist or whatever, you need to know what you're looking at. Am I looking into, I don't know, medieval ages? Am I looking into the 60s? Am I looking into the 80s? Am I looking into interior design? Am I looking into art? Whatever it is that you're looking into and you're tapping your inspiration in, you need to learn how to research correctly. It's more than a Google search. It's much more difficult than that. And also, another skill that you learn in college is that you learn to think for yourself. When you go into college, you've seen Vogue, you've seen Marie Claire, you see others people work, and you want to make work like theirs. So a very, very basic skill in college is to look at this work, but don't let it affect your own work. To learn how to look at it, yet distance yourself from it, and make it your own. And that is a skill that takes a little bit of time. It needs to kind of click in your head somehow to be able to see someone's photography and then take the tiniest element out of it and create the rest of it coming from you. So I think one of the key things I learned in college was to look inside my own head and not look out. And it took a while. And I think the best thing to do if you're a student is to learn to tap into your own emotions, to your own influences, where you come from, what you have grown up with. If I'm Mediterranean. If I try to do something very Nordic style, for example, very Scandinavian style, which is a beautiful design and clean aesthetic, I wouldn't do it as well as someone who was Norwegian, if that makes sense. So look back on yourself, what you have grown up with, what you have learned with, and if you tap into that, you're going to do it right. So it's always good to reflect on the inside and then take it on the outside.
Yeah, that's wonderful for you to end on that, on the notion of cultural capital, because that's something that we're trying to, install into the curriculum more and more.
I could talk to your students in person about that.
Yeah.
But also when it comes to methodology, you will learn a lot on the job. No matter how much you learn in college, it's a different thing to work inside the industry. And there are things about how you conduct yourself professionally, how you behave in a studio, in a photo shoot, or in an office, how you talk to the photographer, to the stylist, or to the creative director. There are things that you have to learn in the job, because it's a different thing talking to your tutor, like you, and it's a different thing talking to a client, doing a professional meeting, talking to a photographer. And you have to be prepared, you have to be organized, and if you are, the day of the shoot is going to go fine. If you're not, you're going to have problems on the day of the shoot. So the outcome of the work always depends on the preparation in advance.
Very well put. Okay, this is a big question. How would you personally define fashion?
It's a debate whether fashion is an art form or not. For me, it is an art form, because even though it has a commercial side to it, whereas art supposedly doesn't, even though it kind of does, I think any way you express yourself creative is an art form. So even though there's a debate, is fashion art or not? For me, fashion is art, the same way music is art, the same way painting is art. If you're a musician, you want to sell records, yet you're doing art. If you're an artist and you're Damien Hirst, you're making millions out of your art, yet you make art. The same thing is with fashion. It is an art form, but it works in a very specific timeline. It is an art form that has to be created every 6 months, every season, with deadlines, something that, you know, a conventional artist or a sculptor wouldn't have, but it is a way of expressing yourself. So for me, a fashion designer is making something out of nothing, and that for me is art. Right,
yeah. Yeah, that's quite a beautiful notion. What I'd like to put to you with regards to the timeline observation is that with blogging and, you know, what the internet has done, allowing people to share information so quickly and allowing people to access information so quickly. It seems to me that this 6 month, the conventional 6 monthly timeline has a variety of kind of, you know, cycles within it, you know. So it's kind of like this kind of things are happening at hyper speed.
True.
But also because of this hyper speed, in a way, it means that there are a number of things, trends, whatever it is, movements, attitudes, perspectives that are happening, you know, fast, but all at the same time. So it's kind of blurring that, you know, these timelines and that 6 months. So in a way, I see this kind of, you know, contradiction. We have this very organized, which industry wants to sort of hold on to, this very organized timeline of, you know, development and delivery. But then I think in real life, things are happening much faster.
Yeah, that's true.
And also, but on the other hand, much more, the overall development is much slower.
That's true.
And you said something, sorry to interrupt you, but you said something today about things when we were talking about buying clothes and how sometimes you need more time to process things, you know, and that you're finding yourself looking at something from maybe 2 or 3 years ago that suddenly you find interesting and you understand why, and potentially not finding anything particularly inspirational to wear or interact with from the current seasons. So I think, you know, having access to information that can stay online and be analysed and reanalyzed, and people through blogs are expressing themselves through what they wear and what they like, even if they can't afford to buy something, but they can put a post about and direct people to establish their taste level. In a way, I struggle to see how we can maintain the conventional seasonal timelines that we have, bearing in mind people are traveling all the time.
True. That's the thing, because when you ask me how you define fashion, the fashion definition has changed throughout the decades. What fashion was, in the new look with the post-war, was not what fashion definition is in the 80s, was not what fashion definition was in the 90s, and definitely not now because of all the digital revolution. The tools we have now have changed the industry. And you see, it has become much more broad. Everybody has an opinion now. Because if you went back 10 years ago, that didn't exist. Only editors had an opinion. Now everybody's entitled to opinion, and much more so than editors in a way. So the power of the opinion on the fashion and what is fashionable and what's not, what sells and what doesn't, has gone to the public, has gone to the bloggers, has gone to the consumers, and not on the specialists anymore. So it's very interesting to see that change and to utilize that change to your advantage. There are a lot of talented, it could be students that are 18 years old. You've seen Tavi starting at 12 years old and getting younger and younger and younger and become young entrepreneurs in a way. And that's really interesting. It's democratic. But at the same time, there is too much noise. There is too many opinions. So you have to have a very good filter to filter yourself through and understand and filter it down to what is useful to you and what is not. Because if you follow everything, it's just too much noise in your head and you forget stuff. And that's the fast pace and the blur of fashion. Like when I was a fashion editor and I was going to London Fashion Week and I was watching 6-7 shows a day, at the end of the day, I didn't remember what I have just seen. And I had to go back through my iPhone photos at the end of that particular day to see where was I and what did I see. Because there are so many more designers, and it used to be, like 5 shows in a day. Now with on and off, you have 20, 30 shows in a day. How are you going to retain all that information in your head is really, really difficult. And fashion designers try to keep up with it. They always want to have new things, to show us, new ideas to present. And that's why we might go to 2 years back and say, oh, that was really nice. I don't remember that. I missed that. Because a very good idea takes a little bit of time to settle. You need to digest it. And we have lost the luxury to have a time to digest it, to have a luxury to sit back and look at it and understand it. So, like, for example, I bought a dress from Lanvin, and it was, what was it? Autumn Winter 11. And I bought it now for Christmas for myself. And I thought to myself, how did I miss that in 2011? That's gorgeous. But it was because you see too much, you have no clue what's happening. And to try to follow that in London and Paris and Milan and New York and all the new fashion weeks that are upcoming, things happening in Ukraine, in Berlin, it's impossible. It's impossible to keep up.
Very well put. The idea of democratic fashion is quite interesting because before I get on to the next question, it's something that I think directs my own personal approach to teaching and teaching creativity. And again, referencing the cultural capital as something that an individual can bring into the mix, and trusting that, in one's personal development. But assuming that democracy is a good thing, even for fashion, then how would you this is an on the fly question, but how would you view, or do you consider the mainstream to be democratic, or do you think what we're seeing is a democratization of the mainstream? Because I consider the mainstream, for example, as very narrow, dominant stream, but very narrow in terms of what it delivers and what it presents in terms of high fashion, luxury fashion, desirable fashion, and how you interact with that. It's very dogmatic. And I think, you know, what the internet has done is allowed people, more and more people, to have a voice, an important voice. So do you think then that, you know, maybe 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, that fashion will be more democratic? Because I don't necessarily consider it to be democratic. And I've also noticed, and I don't know if you can confirm this, that many high fashion brands are not really using the word exclusive anymore, because it's not inclusive by definition. And there are many governmental, you know, initiatives to promote inclusivity, and we feel it here in the university, to embrace everybody's opinion and everybody's individuality. So maybe fashion and luxury fashion in particular are being forced to embrace the idea of inclusivity, you know, room for everyone.
Yes, it's true. The mainstream is not what it used to be. What is mainstream has become much broader. So things that before might have been more avant-garde or more unapproachable, if you want, have now become part of the mainstream. Like, for example, you wouldn't see a rapper like Kanye West wear Maison Martin Margiela like 6 years ago. Now he puts that out in millions of people. And so that is taking something that was avant-garde and for a niche audience, and he's made that mainstream. So what is mainstream now is luxury fashion. You're seeing people wear Givenchy and Celine shoes for street style. That's luxury, but mainstream. So what has happened, I think, is obviously I understand that they're huge companies, they want to sell, because that's, you know, the motivation always behind it. But at the same time, the good thing is people have learned more about fashion. They have learned more about good design, good quality, and so on. But at the same time, individuality is starting to get lost. If you look at street style right now in fashion weeks and stuff, what you will see dresses of the catwalk. So it's street style with, you know, very high-profile bloggers or editors in London and Paris. Is dresses by Christopher Kane, Givenchy, the Valentino shoes. This is losing your individuality and becoming, you know, a catwalk replica.
Right.
So in a way it's good, and in a way it's bad. It's good to be educated about fashion. It's good to learn what is, you know, high aesthetics, good quality, nice style. But at the same time, we're consuming the same circle again and again, from catwalk to street style and back. So it lacks the DIY quality that it had back in the day.
Right, yeah.
So you had the punks, you had the goths. This was all DIY. They made it themselves. Now it's like a vicious circle from the catwalk to the street and back.
Right, okay. Thank you. Give me something to think about there. Okay, so we're near the end. Being self-employed has probably made you aware of challenges that come into play when attempting to work creatively in the commercial world. Are there any in particular that you struggle with? Challenges? Yes,
of course. Being self-employed, it's a good aspects and it's bad aspects. The good thing is that you work for yourself, so you get to pick who you're gonna work with, the project you're gonna work with. You have the freedom to say no to something you don't like. At the same time, you work with different people in each project, so you don't have a stable working environment. Some client might be very nice and very, you know, easy to work with. Some clients might not be as good to work with, and you might have difficulties with them. And it's good in that sense that you get to work with a lot of different people and learn to adapt in many different environments. But you have to be a person who has very good social skills and have to be very adaptive to work in different situations. That could mean a different part of the town each week, different people, different pace, different styles, all these things. You have to be ready to adapt yourself to a different working environment. So it has to do with the personality of a person. Some people might find it easier, to work for one brand or one magazine, and to work with the same people in the same office every day, and it might be better for them. But some people, if they want it more fast-paced and it's a little bit more challenging as well, because you have to hunt down your next project, and that is the most difficult thing of all, to get the next project going, to convince a client to hire you for a project. That is the most difficult part of being freelance.
Right.
And so if you want to have that challenge and that flexibility in your work, then a freelance is the way to go. It has to do with personality and what do you want to do with your career, basically. So some people might enjoy doing the same thing again and again and again, but that doesn't mean that it's boring. If you work in a magazine or if you work for a brand as a visual merchandiser, for example, that doesn't mean that's a boring job. It just means you specialize in one thing and one thing only. But however, if you go freelance, it is definitely much more difficult, especially financially. But the advantage of it is that you get to learn a lot of things. And if you thrive in a social environment, why not?
Right, yeah, of course. Okay, finally, do you think a student about to graduate, the prospect of self-employment requires distinctly different preparation? Or do you think preparation should be more fundamental than that?
Well, wait a minute, what do you mean?
Well,
preparation.
Were you conscious that you wanted to work as a freelancer before you graduated? And if you take yourself back to just before you graduated, do you think, would you have done things any differently depending on whether you wanted to work for someone or work for yourself?
To work as a freelancer, the first thing you need is a very, very strong portfolio. So if a brand wants to hire you as a stylist or as a photographer or whatever you're freelancing, you need to have a work experience with other brands, because that's what matters in the freelance industry. If I have worked with Givenchy, for example, it would be easy for me to be hired by another brand. If I have no other clients in my portfolio, why would the brand trust me with no experience to work for them? So if you want to work freelance, the best thing to do is to shadow a big freelancer, to be an assistant on a big freelancer. So you can assist a fashion editor or a stylist or another photographer to see how a freelancer works, how they organize themselves, how they write the emails, because the tone of the language is really important, how you talk on the phone, how you do your invoices, all these simple things that you might have never thought about, but they're part of being a freelancer. And so if you assist someone for 2 or 6 months, you kind of get an idea how the industry works, and then you might be able to be a freelancer on your own. I think for a graduate, they should start with really small projects with up-and-coming labels to kind of build their portfolio towards the bigger labels. So it takes much more work than starting in full-time employment straight away. Right. But it's worth the trouble if you want to do it. And if you want to become a stylist or a photographer, the way is to test shoot your way throughout, to submit to all the magazines throughout. You will work for years without getting paid, but that's how the industry works. And essentially, you will build a substantial portfolio, you will build it, and you'll be able to go to a bigger magazine and so on. But that also depends on the city. It's different working in London, different working in Paris, different working in New York. It depends on the industry. There is a different way of doing things in London that they don't do it like that in Paris. I have a very good friend who is a fashion photographer, very big in Paris, who decided to move to London for a creative change, and he had a difficulty adapting in the London market because he was used to much, much bigger budgets in Paris. Right. It was like, what? And so things like that. And also, I forgot what I was about to say. Oh, I was going to say that to be a freelancer, you have to think of yourself as a company. No one's gonna hire a photographer or a stylist who their own website doesn't look good or their own business card. You have to think of yourself as a brand, as your own company. Because if I'm, for example, I'm looking for a makeup artist or a photographer for an editorial, and their website is really amateurish or really behind technologically or really, you know, not well designed in any way, I will question their aesthetics. So even though if their photography is excellent, if their website doesn't reflect that, you're thinking, does he really know what he's doing? Is he really a good professional? So you have to think on more things than just your product.
Right.
More things than just, this is my styling, this is my photography, or this is my garment, my fashion design. You have to think of yourself as a complete brand. From your logo to your business card, to your email address, because a lot of people will have a simple Hotmail address, and that is not professional. You need to kind of have your own .com address. All the little things that put you together as a brand will make a difference.
Wonderful. Thanks, Katia. No, thank you. That was
Thank
great.
you.
That was great. Thank you.